The Airbnb listing looked perfect. A secluded cabin in the woods, far from the noise of the city. A place to clear my head for a few days. The photos showed a cozy interior, a stone fireplace, and large windows overlooking the dense pine tree. It was cheap too, suspiciously cheap, but I convinced myself that it was just a slow season. The host's profile was sparse. No picture, just the name Daniel and a short description. A peaceful retreat for those looking to escape. I booked it immediately. The drive there was long, the road narrowing into a winding dirt path as I got closer. The trees thickened, the signal bars on my phone dwindling until they disappeared completely. As I pulled up, the cabin stood in eerie silence, smaller than I expected. It looked forgotten. The wood was aged, darkened by weather, and the windows were slightly fogged, as if the house had been holding its breath for years. The key was under the mat, just as Daniel said. The inside was warmer, surprisingly clean, and exactly like the pictures. There was no TV, just a bookshelf filled with old, dust-covered novels. The air smelled faintly of pine and something else, something stale. I shrugged it off, setting my bags down in the small bedroom. That was when I noticed the door. It was at the end of the hallway, just past the bathroom. A simple wooden door with a brass handle, but something about it felt wrong. I tested the knob. Locked. That wasn't in the listing. I texted Daniel. "Hey, what's the locked door in the hallway?" He responded almost immediately. "Storage. Please do not try to open it." Something about the phrasing unsettled me, but I let it go. It wasn't my house. I had no reason to snoop. That night, the unease settled deeper. The silence in the cabin was unnatural, thick. Outside, the trees barely swayed, as if something was watching, waiting. I locked the bedroom door, crawled into bed, and tried to sleep. I woke up to breathing, soft, measured breaths, just outside my bedroom door. I held my breath, listening. The sound was unmistakable. Someone was. The wooden floor creaked. My fingers tightened around my phone as I slowly reached for it. The screen was blank, no service. My heart pounded as I lay still, forcing myself to breathe quietly. The breathing stopped. Then, a single slow knock on the bedroom door. I couldn't move. I couldn't even think. The knock came again, louder this time. I must have blacked out because the next thing I knew, sunlight was filtering through the blinds and everything was silent again. The door was still locked. There was no sign that anything had happened. I told myself I had imagined it. Maybe the silence of the cabin was getting to me. Maybe I was just paranoid. That afternoon, I decided to set up my phone to record. I propped it up on the bookshelf, facing the hallway, making sure the locked door was in view, just in case. That night, I slept with the light on. At 3:12 a.m., I woke up again. A cold, crawling sensation ran down my spine. Something felt different. I turned my head slowly. The locked door was open. The darkness beyond it was absolute. My stomach twisted as I sat up, my body frozen between running and staying perfectly still. My phone was still recording. Trembling, I grabbed it, pressed stop, and turned on the screen. The video showed nothing at first, just the dimly lit hallway, the closed door. Hours passed in silence. Then, at exactly 3:12 a.m., the doorknob turned on its own. The door creaked open an inch, then two. A shadow slipped through the gap. My breath hitched as I saw it. Tall, thin, moving unnaturally slow. It stood in the hallway, head tilted as if listening. Then, it turned. It faced the camera directly. The screen glitched violently, distorting, warping, and for a split second, the shadow was inches away from the lens, face obscured, a dark, gaping mouth stretching too wide, before the video cut off. I threw my phone down, my pulse hammering. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. A notification buzzed on my phone. A text from Daniel. "I told you not to open the door." My stomach lurched. I scrambled to reply. "I didn't. I swear to God, I didn't." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. A new message. "Then why is it open?" I looked up. The door was wide open now. The darkness beyond it pulsed. Something shifted inside, deep in the shadows. A single, whispering breath slithered into the... And then the lights went out. I never saw what stepped through. I booked the Airbnb on a whim, needing a quiet weekend away from the chaos of my life. The listing described it as a charming farmhouse on the outskirts of town, built in the 1800s but fully renovated. The pictures showed a rustic interior with antique furniture and a clawfoot tub, the kind of place that seemed peaceful. The reviews were all glowing, except one. Buried beneath the 5-star ratings, there was a single 1-star review with no comment, just the name, "Not Alone." It struck me as odd, but I brushed it off. Probably someone being dramatic. I arrived just before sunset. The house stood alone, miles from the nearest neighbor. It was beautiful in an eerie way. Aged wood, large front porch, and a wide, empty field stretching beyond the backyard. The host, Margaret, had left the key under the flower pot as promised. Inside, the house smelled of lavender and something else, faint, almost metallic. The wooden floors creaked beneath my feet as I explored. The living room was lined with old books, the kitchen spotless, but the house felt still. Not the comforting kind of stillness, but the kind that makes you feel like you've walked into a place that has been waiting for something. The bedroom was upstairs, and that's where I saw it. A large, ornate mirror stood against the wall at the end of the hall. It looked out of place, too grand for a farmhouse, its gold frame chipped and tarnished. But what unsettled me was its placement. It wasn't hung up or leaned against the wall naturally. It was facing the staircase, as if someone had dragged it there recently. I shook off the discomfort, telling myself it was just old decor. That night, as I lay in bed, I heard it. A floorboard creaked, not from the house settling. This was a slow, deliberate sound. I held my breath, heart pounding. The noise came from the hallway. A second creak, then a pause. I reached for my phone, no signal. The Wi-Fi wasn't working either. Then, a whisper, low, indistinct, right outside my door. I bolted upright, fumbling to turn on the bedside lamp. My fingers trembled as I reached for the doorknob. I don't know what I was expecting to see, but when I finally swung the door open, the mirror was closer. Not by much, but enough. It now stood at the top of the stairs, directly facing my bedroom. I was certain it had been at the end of the hall before. The whispering had stopped, but a suffocating feeling lingered. I was not alone. I backed into my room and locked the door. Sleep was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt like someone was watching me. At some point, exhaustion took over. I woke up to an unnatural stillness, like the air itself was holding its breath. The house was silent, but something was wrong. My stomach twisted as I turned my head. The mirror was inside my room, right at the foot of my bed. The reflection wasn't right. I should have seen myself, disheveled, terrified. But the figure in the mirror was standing, tall, unmoving, its head slightly tilted. I wanted to scream, to run, but my body was frozen. My breath hitched as I watched, paralyzed, while the figure slowly lifted a hand. It pressed its palm against the glass, a palm that was facing the wrong way. The fingers flexed as if testing something, and then it stepped forward. The surface of the mirror rippled, like water breaking. That was enough. I lunged for the door, throwing it open and sprinting down the stairs. The front door wouldn't budge. My hands fumbled with the lock, my pulse hammering in my ears. Behind me, the creaking started again. Slow, deliberate footsteps coming down the stairs. I slammed my fist against the wood, desperate. Then, the door swung open. I tumbled outside, breath ragged, feet pounding against the dirt as I ran to my car. My hands shook as I jammed the key into the ignition. I didn't look back, not until I was miles away, gasping for breath. Hands clenched so tightly around the wheel that my knuckles ached. I pulled into a gas station and grabbed my phone. The Wi-Fi connected instantly. There was a message from Margaret, the host. "I'm sorry, I should have removed the mirror before you arrived. Please tell me you didn't touch it." I didn't reply. I couldn't. But as I sat there, my reflection in the rearview mirror flickered. Just for a second, and I swore it smiled. I had been traveling for work and was exhausted when I booked the Airbnb. It was a last-minute decision. A small, one-bedroom apartment in an old building downtown. The listing was vague, but the reviews were decent, cheap, clean, and close to where I needed to be. That was all I cared about. When I arrived, the host, Eleanor, wasn't there to greet me. Instead, she had left the key under the doormat. The building itself was unsettling. It was tall and narrow, wedged between two modern office buildings like it had been forgotten by time. The hallway smelled faintly of dust and something else, something I couldn't quite place. The apartment was simple: a kitchenette, a small bathroom, a single window that overlooked an alley. The air felt thick, like the place had been closed up for too long. As I set my bag down, my phone buzzed. A message from Eleanor. "Welcome. Please, whatever you do, don't open the door at the end of the hall. Enjoy your stay." I frowned, looking around. There was no door at the end of the hall. I checked again. The hallway led from the front door to the bedroom, with the bathroom in between. No other doors. Maybe she had sent the message to the wrong guest. I shrugged it off and decided to shower. That's when I heard it. A knock. A slow, rhythmic knock, coming from somewhere in the apartment. I froze, heart pounding. The front door was locked. There was no one in the apartment but me. Another knock. It came from behind me, from inside the bathroom wall. My stomach turned. I pressed my ear against the tile. Silent. Maybe the pipes? Old buildings make weird noises. I finished quickly and stepped back into the bedroom. That's when I saw it. A door. It was at the end of the hallway now. a plain wooden door that hadn't been there. I felt a wave of dizzy pulse. I squeezed my eyes shut, breathing. When I opened them, the door was still there. I swallowed hard. I didn't want to go near it, but I couldn't stop staring. Another knock. This time, it came from the other side of the door. Something wanted me to open it. I stepped closer, pressing my palm against the wood. It was cold. My fingers trembled as I reached for the knob. But then, my phone buzzed again. A second message from Eleanor. Do not open it, no matter what it says. I yanked my hand back as if burned. What it says? I hadn't heard anything but knocking. And then, I did. A voice, low, muffled, coming from the other side of the door. Please, let me out. The words sent a shiver down my spine. It sounded like a man's voice, desperate, pained. I've been trapped in here for so long. Please, just open the door. I stepped back. My breathing was shallow, my skin cold. It's dark in here. I don't want to be alone anymore. My mind raced. Was this a trick? A prank? I reached for my phone to call Eleanor, but there was no service, no Wi-Fi. A scraping sound echoed from behind the door. A slow, dragging noise, like fingernails raking against wood. And then the voice changed. Deeper, hollow, wrong. You're going to open it. I turned and bolted. I grabbed my bag and ran for the front door, my hands fumbling with the lock. The knocking behind me grew louder, more frantic. Then, bang! Something slammed against the door. Bang! Bang! I didn't wait to find out what it was. I threw the door open and sprinted down the hall, my own breath ragged in my ears. I didn't stop running until I reached the lobby, bursting out into the cold night air. My phone buzzed one last time. A final message from Eleanor. You saw it, didn't you? I'm sorry. It always shows up for new guests. It's best if you don't come back. I left the key on the front desk and never looked back. I don't know what was behind that door, but sometimes, late at night, I still hear knocking. I booked the Airbnb for a simple reason. I needed a cheap place to stay while visiting an old college friend. The listing was for a small cabin deep in the woods, isolated but cozy and peaceful, according to the reviews. I wasn't looking for anything fancy, just a quiet place to crash for a couple of nights. The host, Daniel, sent me a message a few hours before check-in. Welcome. Just a heads up. There's a second bedroom in the cabin. It's locked. Please don't try to open it. Enjoy your stay. I reread the message a few times. It was weird, but not a deal breaker. Maybe he used it for storage. Whatever the reason, I wasn't about to snoop. I arrived just before sunset. The cabin looked exactly like the picture, small, rustic, surrounded by thick trees on all sides. The nearest road was a mile away, and the silence of the forest was almost suffocating. Inside, it was simple but comfortable. A fireplace, a tiny kitchen, and a single hallway leading to the bedroom and bathroom. And at the very end of that hallway, there it was, the locked door. It was just a regular wooden door, nothing unusual about it, but something about it made my skin crawl. Maybe it was the way it seemed slightly off-center, or how the light didn't quite reach the bottom, a thin, dark gap underneath. I ignored it. I set my bags down, made some coffee, and settled in for the night. That's when I started hearing things. At first, it was just a faint shuffling noise coming from behind the locked door. I tried to convince myself it was the house settling, or maybe a raccoon outside. Then came the tapping, software, rhythmic, like fingertips drumming against wood. My stomach turned. I stood in the hallway, staring at the door. The tapping stopped. Then, tap, tap, tap. But this time, it was lower, near the floor. I took a step back. The air felt wrong. I grabbed my phone to text Daniel, but there was no service. Figures. I decided to sleep it off. Maybe I was just psyching myself out. At around 2 a.m., I woke up freezing. The fire had burned out, and the air was icy cold. Then, I heard it again. Not tapping this, scratching, like nails dragging along wood. I sat up in bed, barely breathing. It was coming from the hallway. I reached for my phone and turned on the flashlight. Slowly, I crept toward the door. The scratching stopped. A long, agonizing silence followed. Then, a whisper, low, breathy, coming from the other side of the door. Let me out! A chill ran down my spine. I stepped back, heart pounding. Then I saw it. The gap under the door. I swear. It had been smaller before. Now, it was wider, as if the door had shifted. I ran back to bed, pulled the covers over my head like a child, and forced myself to stay still. I barely slept. The next morning, I decided to leave. I packed my bags in record time, grabbed my keys, and headed for the door. But when I passed the hallway, I stopped cold. The door was open, just an inch, enough to see inside. I don't know why, but I leaned forward, peering into the darkness. The room was empty, no furniture, no windows, just a chair, and deep scratches along the walls. My phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. Hey, I just got service. Sorry, I should have warned you. I had a guest a while back who wasn't well. He stayed in that room. I locked it after he left. Sometimes at night it sounds like he never did. I didn't respond. I just grabbed my things and as I drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The door was wide open. I needed a break. Work had been draining, and I was desperate to get away from the city, even just for a weekend. So, when I found a secluded Airbnb by the lake, cheap, cozy, and far from everything, I booked it without thinking twice. The host, Margaret, sent me a message before I arrived. Welcome. Just a small note. There's an old shed behind the cabin. Please don't go near it. It's unsafe. Enjoy your stay. I didn't think much of it. A rundown shed in the woods? No big deal. The drive was long, the roads winding through dense forest, before opening up to a quiet, still lake. The cabin itself was charming, small but comfortable, with a large deck overlooking the water, the kind of place where you could lose yourself in the silence. But something felt off. I noticed it the second I stepped inside. The air was stale, thick with the scent of damp wood and something faintly metallic. The floorboards creaked under my weight, like they were reacting to me being there. Then I saw the footprints, dirt-streaked footprints, leading from the back door to the middle of the living room. I stood frozen, my breath caught in my throat. Had someone been inside? I checked the locks. The doors were secure, the windows shut. Nothing looked broken. I told myself it was probably the last guest. Maybe they had tracked in mud before leaving. Still, unease settled in my stomach like a rock. As night fell, the cabin grew eerily quiet. Not even the sound of crickets outside, just the occasional rustling of trees. Then, around midnight, I heard it, a soft, wet sound. At first, I thought it was water dripping from a pipe. But then I heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming from behind the cabin. I grabbed my phone, creeping toward the back window. In the dim moonlight, I saw it. The shed. The door was open. I was sure it had been closed when I arrived. A dark shape shifted inside. I stumbled back, heart racing. I grabbed my keys, ready to leave when my phone buzzed. A new message from Margaret. Did you open the shed? I felt my stomach drop. My hands trembled as I typed back, no, but it's open. The reply came almost instantly. Lock the doors. Don't go outside. I obeyed without hesitation, bolting every lock, checking every window, then knocking, soft at first, then harder, coming from the back door. My phone buzzed again. Whatever you do, do not let it in. I couldn't breathe. The knocking turned into pounding. The entire door rattled. Then a voice, low, guttural. Let me in. I'm so cold. I squeezed my eyes shut, pressing myself against the wall. The voice grew distorted, like something struggling to speak. Please, I forgot my way back. Help me. My body locked up in sheer terror. Something pressed against the window. A dark, twisted shape, just out of view. Then silence. It didn't leave until dawn. When I finally opened the door, the footprints were back, leading from the shed to my back door. I didn't stay. As I drove away, Margaret sent one final message. I should have removed that list. I'm sorry. The last guest, he went into the shed. We never found him. But sometimes, late at night, he tries to come back. I was on a road trip, driving across the country alone. The long stretches of highway were exhausting, and after 8 hours behind the wheel, I was desperate for a place to crash. I found a last-minute Airbnb in a small, forgotten town, the kind of place that didn't show up on most maps. The listing was vague but cheap. Historic home, quiet, perfect for travelers. The host, Mr. Wallace, sent me a message before check-in. Welcome. Feel free to use anything in the house. Just one rule. Please don't sleep in the master bedroom. Not for guests. That should have been my first warning. The house was old. Not charming old, but decaying. Tall and narrow, with dark wood paneling and thick, musty air. The kind of place that felt too quiet, too still. Inside, the furniture was antique, heavy and untouched, like a museum display. The walls were lined with faded portraits, Victorian-style paintings of solemn people staring blankly forward. Their eyes followed me as I walked past. I found the guest room and dropped my bags, but curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to take a peek at the master bedroom. The door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open just an inch, my breath catching in my throat. The room was cold, much colder than the rest of the house. A massive four-poster bed stood in the center, covered in a thick black veil, and then I saw them, indentations on the bed, as if someone had just been lying there. I shut the door fast. I tried to shake the feeling off, telling myself it was just an old bed sinking with time. That night, I barely slept. At around 2 a.m., I woke up freezing. The blanket had been pulled off of me. My breath came out in short, panicked gasps. Then footsteps, slow, dragging, moving outside my door. I grabbed my phone, trying to stay still. The footsteps stopped. Then the door handle turned. I shot up, my heart hammering. It was locked, but something scraped against the wood. Then a whisper just outside. "You're in my house." I pressed my back against the headboard, my fingers trembling. Then silence. I didn't move until the sun came up. When I finally opened the door, the hallway was empty, but something had changed. The master bedroom door was wide open. The bed? Perfectly made. The indentations were gone, as if no one had ever been there. I grabbed my things and left without looking back. As I pulled away, my phone buzzed. A new message from Mr. Wallace. "You opened the door, didn't you?" I was traveling for work, hopping from city to city, and after weeks of staying in sterile, overpriced hotels, I decided to try something different. A cheap Airbnb in a quiet residential neighborhood sounded perfect. The listing was simple: private guest suite in a family home, safe, comfortable. The host, Linda, sent a message before I arrived. "Welcome! My husband and I live upstairs, but you'll have the whole basement suite to yourself. Let us know if you need anything." I checked in late, around 10 p.m. The house was modest but clean, with a separate entrance leading down to the basement. Something about the basement felt wrong. It was too cold, too still. The living area was fine, if a bit dated: old floral couches, yellowed wallpaper, a tiny kitchenette. But the bedroom felt different. As soon as I stepped inside, I noticed the smell: faint, sweet, rotten. It was coming from the closet. I hesitated, then swung it open. Nothing, just a few empty hangers. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been in there. I forced myself to ignore it, chalking the smell up to bad ventilation. I locked the bedroom door, got into bed, and tried to sleep. At around 3 a.m., I woke up to shuffling, software, close. It was coming from the closet. My entire body tensed. Then, the door creaked open, just an inch. I held my breath, my pulse hammering in my ears. The room was pitch black except for the dim glow from the hallway nightlight. I stared at the closet, my heart pounding. Then, a whisper. "You're in my room." The voice was too close. I bolted upright, fumbling for my phone's flashlight. I pointed it at the closet. Nothing. The door was wide open, but the smell stronger, like something had been rotting in there for years. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. At dawn, I packed up and left. As I was about to drive off, Linda came out onto the porch, frowning. "You look exhausted," she said. "Is everything okay?" I hesitated, then asked, "Has anyone ever complained about the basement?" Her expression shifted. "We don't usually rent it out," she admitted. "Not since—" She stopped herself. I felt cold. "Since what?" I asked. She sighed. "Our son used to live down there. He passed away in his sleep. That was years ago." A chill ran down my spine. I forced a nod, muttered something about needing to hit the road, and left. As I turned onto the main street, my phone buzzed. A notification from the Airbnb app. "Thank you for staying with us. Hope to see you again." And beneath that, a new private message. "Did he talk to you too?" I was traveling alone, something I had done countless times before. This time, I had booked a last-minute Airbnb in a small town, one of those places that barely show up on a map. The listing was simple: charming guest house, quiet and private. The host, Evelyn, messaged me before my arrival. "Welcome. The house is all yours. Just one thing. Please don't go outside after midnight. It's for your own safety." I thought it was a joke, maybe a way to keep me from wandering onto her property. I sent a polite "no problem" and didn't think much of it. The guest house was small but cozy, sitting at the edge of a dense forest. The inside was clean, warm, and perfectly normal, except for the locks. Every door, every window had multiple locks. Not just the standard deadbolts, but heavy-duty chains and reinforced latches. Even the tiny bathroom window had a metal bar across it. That was my first clue that something was wrong. By 11 p.m., the night had fallen into an unnatural silence. No wind, no crickets, nothing. Then, just before midnight, I heard it. A soft, rhythmic tapping on the window. At first, I thought it was a branch in the wind, but then the taps turned into knocks. Deliberate, slow. I froze. It was coming from the back door. I grabbed my phone, my heart pounding. Then, a low whisper. "Let me." The voice was thin, raspy, a voice that didn't sound human. I stood there, frozen in place. Then, the door handle moved. Something was trying to get in. I backed away slowly, my eyes locked on the door. The knocking turned into pounding. Then, silence. I waited, my breath caught in my throat. Then my phone buzzed. A message from Evelyn. "Whatever you do, do not open the door." Cold dread filled my stomach. The locks rattled. I could hear something scraping against the wood, like nails dragging down the surface. Then, footsteps, circling the house. I moved to the front window, carefully pulling back the curtain, and I saw it. A tall, thin figure standing just beyond the porch light, not moving, watching. It had no face, just a smooth, pale shape where a face should be. Then, it started moving toward the window. I stumbled back, my breath caught in my throat. Another message from Evelyn. "It knows you saw it. Get away from them now." I obeyed, locking myself in the bathroom, my back pressed against the door. I don't know how long I stayed there, shaking, waiting. At some point, the noises stopped. When the sun finally rose, I gathered my things and ran to my car. Evelyn was waiting outside, watching me with a solemn expression. She didn't say anything, just gave me a small, sad nod. As I drove away, my phone buzzed one last time. A final message from Evelyn. You got lucky. Most people don't make it through their first night. I was looking for a quiet getaway, somewhere remote where I could disconnect from everything. I found a rustic cabin on Airbnb, listed as secluded forest retreat, perfect for relaxation. The picture showed a cozy wooden interior, a fireplace, and a stunning view of the trees. The host, Daniel, had great reviews. It seemed perfect. Before my arrival, Daniel sent me a message. Enjoy your stay. Just one thing. If you hear anything at night, don't open the curtains. I laughed it off, thinking it was just some local superstition. The drive was long, taking me deep into the mountains. When I finally arrived, the cabin looked exactly like the pictures, quiet, peaceful. But as soon as I stepped inside, I noticed something strange. All the windows had thick, heavy curtains, and they were nailed shut, every single one. That was my first red flag, but I was already there, and I wasn't about to turn around after driving 5 hours. I settled in, made some dinner, and curled up by the fireplace with a book. By midnight, the cabin had fallen into complete silence. No wind, no animals, just stillness. Then, a sound outside. Software, shuffling. Something was moving in the trees. I held my breath, listening. Then, a tap. A single deliberate tap against the window behind me. I froze. Then another. Tap, tap, tap. It wasn't random, it was rhythmic, intentional. I clenched my fists, trying to ignore it. Then, a whisper. I know you're in there. My heart stopped. The voice was low, unnatural. I stared at the nailed curtains, suddenly understanding why they were there. The tapping grew louder, more insistent. Then, scraping, something dragging its nails across the glass. I wanted to run, but my body wouldn't move. Then, my phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. No matter what it says, do not open the curtains. My fingers hovered over my phone, trembling. The whispering turned into laughter, soft at first, then growing distorted and wrong. Then, the front door handle turned. I bolted. I ran into the bathroom, locking the door behind me. Then silence, long, unbearable, and then breathing, right outside the bathroom door. Slow, raspy, then knocking. I pressed myself against the wall, shaking. Then, the voice again. I just want to see you. I clenched my eyes shut, praying for morning. At some point, the noise stopped. When the first rays of sunlight slipped through the cracks in the curtains, I packed my bags without looking outside. As I stepped onto the porch, I noticed something in the dirt. Footprints. They circled the cabin, over and over. Somehow I knew, whatever it was, it had been waiting for me to look. I jumped into my car and sped away, my hands shaking on the wheel. As I reached the main road, my phone buzzed one last time. A final message from Daniel. You didn't look, did you?